Hi, I'm Josh, the dad of hobbies. Today's hobby, ER. I've spent the last year watching all 300 plus episodes of ER. Before anyone asks, yes, I've also watched The Pitt, which I was waiting to make this video until I finished. But ER, for those that weren't around when it was first on, for those that don't remember it, or hopefully you all have heard of it, ER was the medical show. And in fact, every medical show in the last 30 years clearly has pulled from ER. So ER started in 94. It was developed by John Wells, who went on to make many shows. Michael Crichton, who, by the way, his influence on media in the last 40 years cannot be understated, and several others. It is impossible to describe in today's TV world how big ER was. Even the biggest shows you can think of from today, Game of Thrones doesn't come close. Um, the there's movies, franchises, even the Marvel movies today probably don't come as close to how big ER was. Some of that was just the nature of television. You got it once a week. There was no streaming. There was barely any internet. There was no way to connect other than to talk at the offices the next day. But a lot of it was the show itself. And I will tell you, after watching as much TV as I have in the last 30 plus years, those first 6 seasons of ER are arguably the best television I've ever seen. The show overall is extraordinary. You'll find a lot of folks have issues with later characters and later seasons, and yeah, it probably doesn't get anywhere near the level that those first 6 seasons do, certainly in the back half. But honestly, I loved it all. I loved all the characters. You'll find that people hated certain characters or certain romances or certain things that they did later on. There are objectively critical things you can say about every character. Yes, even the beloved Mark Green included. But honestly, I just enjoyed the ride. I loved it. And there are some episodes that you go watch or go read any ER top 10 list and they'll always be on there. Um, Love Labor's Lost, of course, is incredible. Hell and High Water, and in fact, I think those two are sort of two sides of the same coin. I don't want to spoil the episode. One focuses on Mark Green and a delivery that he has to manage. The other focuses on Doug Ross and saving a child. Both are objectively some of the best episodes that ER has done, which, as I said, makes them some of the best episodes on TV. But I love the whole thing. I love the silly the Breakfast Club episode was just fun. The Quentin Tarantino, keep in mind, Quentin Tarantino at the height of his career in the 90s directed an episode of ER, right? People wanted to be involved in ER. It is, again, impossible to understate how much influence this show had, this show still has, and the legacy that the actors, the writers, the characters have continued to have throughout the last 30 years. So ER, as I said, started in 94. I was 7 when it aired, right? And for it to go as long as it did 15 years, right? So to 2009, that's my entire childhood. And while I didn't watch it as a kid, and my parents didn't really watch ER, at least not consistently enough for me to catch up on it, even back then, you knew the impact it was having, right? Even as a kid in elementary school, I knew the impact that show was having. And 30 plus years later, not only does it hold up, it honestly doesn't even feel that dated. You get a little bit of silly things about, somebody makes fun of the internet or, cell phones are the, old Nokia ones. But other than that, it still holds. And some of that is just because of the nature of the show. Some of that is because hospitals feel like they're 30 years old these days. And it doesn't feel that dated to be in a hospital that's 30 years old. But the entertainment value, but also the emotional impact and the ride that you take for those 15 seasons is unbelievable. And I actually sat here and thought about it when I was making this episode. I cannot think of a show that has started in the last 15 years that has that length of episodes, right? So the shows that are currently on that still have long running shows, or Simpsons, obviously, right? But dramas, you have all the NCISs, Law and Order, and SVU now. Blue Bloods ended recently and just got a spinoff, but lasted about 15, maybe 14 years. But none of those started in the last 15 years. They were already running. And that, again, speaks to the nature of the television industry these days, and streaming, of course. And there's arguments on both sides for less episodes with more impact versus longer seasons with greater story development. But the fact that the industry has shifted for whatever reason to not having those types of shows, I think also speaks to the value of the shows that did make it that long. And again, ER especially, and any medical show that you watch today, everything from Grey's Anatomy, certainly, New Amsterdam, The Resident, The Good Doctor, House, um, Scrubs, even, all pulled from ER. It and people who watch the show will know this. It set the tone, and I encourage you, and I absolutely um, feel that everybody who enjoys any level of medical drama should go watch this show. There's all kinds of lists that you can watch for what's the best episodes if you're a first time viewer, if you want to just get the highlights. I've mentioned a couple. There's the moments for each character. The end of season 6 with the return of a certain character, the way certain characters were written off and certain characters died. All of it just hits you. There's character growth at every level. Archie Morris is one of the best character arcs that I've ever seen in TV, and that happened in the last 6 seasons. There's just so much good in this show, and given today's medical industry environment, it's really nice to go back and watch something like this that talked about it so early on, and the amount of impact that this show has had in the medical field, I think, is nothing short of extraordinary. Which brings us actually to The Pitt. So for those that have not heard of it or haven't watched it yet, The Pitt is Noah Wyle, who got his start on ER. His sort of homage to ER, him and John Wells and R. Scott Gemmell, who were all working on ER, initially actually wanted to do not a revamp, but sort of a sequel to ER. And for multiple reasons, it didn't work out, but they wanted to capture the essence of the show. The Pitt is 15 episodes this first season. Next season starts in January. And they've done exactly what ER did 30 years ago. They have innovated both the medical show concept as well as made such an impact. Not only has the show won, I want to think it was nominated for over a dozen Emmys. I think it won at least half of them. But the outpouring of support and love from the medical community for The Pitt is very similar to what was happening 30 years ago. And it is in every way a spiritual sequel, which is exactly what they were going for. But the emotional depth and the ways in which they did and produced The Pitt. So, for instance, doing it all in one day, doing it in continuity. It was filmed. So most TV shows, you film a scene just because that's the day that they have either the weather that works or the props or the characters, the actors, or whatever, and it's all edited together. The Pitt is filmed in continuity for the most part, and the production that takes is extraordinary. There's so many things about The Pitt that 30 years later, anybody who grew up watching ER can absolutely feel is happening again. Even for myself, who just spent a year watching a 30-plus-year-old show, to then immediately go into The Pitt, it didn't feel like a jarring shift. It felt like a natural progression. And I love TV. I will watch TV any chance I get. I think TV is an incredible medium for character storytelling. And I'm telling you all that those first 6 seasons of ER are some of the best TV I've ever watched. So I encourage you all to go watch it. Definitely feel free to share your comments if you have watched it or if you've seen certain episodes. If you disagree with things I've said and there are certain characters you absolutely hate, let me know. I can tell you, I love them all, even the controversial ones. But you should all go watch ER and watch The Pitt. Season 2 is coming soon. So that's it. That was today's hobby. Feel free to follow, like, subscribe for whatever hobby we're going to get into next. Thanks so much.